It is the Everton Byline, episode 9, and at the 9th time of asking Paddy, we have got a win to talk about. Even in pre-season, we didn't get a win to talk about, but we have got a win to talk about. A Premier League win. Everton beat Crystal Palace 2-1. We will get into that, but first and foremost, mate, how are you doing? Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, much better weekend after the result on Saturday, obviously. Managed to watch Match of the Day for the first time this season, which is always a positive, isn't it? And yeah, everything's easier, I think, after a positive result like that. It just feels like a bit of a cloud has lifted, perhaps.
Yeah, 10:30's too late for me now. Even on a Saturday night, I'm well in bed by then, so I have to wait for Sunday morning to watch it. But yeah, certainly good to get up and, not willingly turn over to Peppa Pig or something that the baby wants to watch, but actually have Match of the Day on instead. But yeah, like I said, we'll get into that game and the usual topics. As I always say, watch us on YouTube. Do like, do subscribe, do leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. Maybe the topics we're going to be talking about. If you're listening on Spotify or any other audio platform, leave us a rating, leave us a review. And also just a heads up that we're looking for a potential sponsor for this show as well. So if you're out there and you're looking for your business to potentially get some promotion to thousands of listeners and viewers that we have all around the world, do get in touch with myself at MattJFootball on Twitter, or with Paddy at Paddy_Boyland is yours, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
You should know this off by heart. Come on. We're trying to appeal to businesses here who want to work with us. You should know. It should be instantaneous.
In which case, everything Matt has said is correct.
Just at MattJFootball is easy to remember in that, of course. Or the end, yeah, it's easy to get in touch with us, I'm sure, if you're listening to this as well. So, yeah, like I said, if you do want to promote your business to the thousands of listeners we have around the world, or anything else you're working on at the moment, do give us a shout. We're always looking to work with potential new partners. Hopefully we're together. But we all start with the win, Paddy. Obviously, big relief at Goodison at the weekend. Obviously, Dwight McNeil's sort of swing of his left foot early in that second half changed the course of the game, really. And when we figure topics for today, I think one of the ones we eventually settled on here is what did change in the Palace game, or did actually that much really change in the Palace game? Was it for you all down to Dwight McNeil and that swing of his left boot at the start of the second half that ultimately altered the course of this football match?
No, I think we have to trace this back a little bit earlier in the game, in fairness to Dyche and the rest of the team. McNeil obviously plays a pivotal role and produces 2 moments of quality. But there are other changes, I think, at half-time that alter the trajectory, change the momentum. And if we're talking about patterns from the season so far, one of the things we've probably outlined already is that Dyche has not always been particularly proactive in changing the course of these games. 45 minutes in here, and I think it was up there with Everton's worst half of the season in the way they allowed Palace to basically dictate on their own terms. I thought the midfield was outnumbered and dominated. Glasner, the Palace manager, Oliver Glasner, looked like he'd done a bit of a number on Sean Dyche tactically and having kind of 2 attacking midfielders behind Everton's central midfielders, Decore and Mangala. And they just got swamped, and the atmosphere just felt like it was on the turn a bit, didn't it? Some boos at half-time, and boos for a poor result and performance up to that point. So something did need to change, and it's not always a given with Dyche that it does, of course. But I think, to his credit, they came out and it was different in the second half, not just with a personnel change, with Jack Harrison replacing Jesper Lindstrom, but just in the way they went at Palace. The lack of intensity in the first half changed, and there was a real intensity in the second half. And they began on the front foot, I think, and basically won the game, as Glasner said afterwards in our press conference, in about 15 minutes with the Dwight McNeil goals. So I think there is credit due here to him. I also think there's credit due, by the way, later on in the game at 2-1 for seemingly learning some lessons from previous weeks with his substitutions. I thought James Garner and Idrissa Gueye coming on when there were a few tired legs was absolutely ideal. It's the kind of thing we've been crying out for on this podcast in general for some time now. There's fresh legs in midfield, shutting the game down. He spoke about how in debrief sessions with the players after some of those dramatic defeats, they were trying to explain that it's about doing certain things, turning the opposition round, playing in the corners, winning free kicks, holding on to possession, basically managing the game a lot better, and then foregrounding the basics in your own penalty area. And I think in all of those aspects, Everton were much better. And there's obviously an element of bias here, recency bias with the result, but I think Everton did close this out a lot. I'm struggling to think of a big Crystal Palace chance, for example, after 2-1, despite the fact that they had a lot more possession. And Jack Harrison obviously made an impact off the bench in setting up the second goal with a brilliant piece of skill. So, yeah, I think it looked to me, I wrote this afterwards, I think it looked to me that Everton is starting, maybe very slowly, admittedly, to perhaps learn a few lessons from the opening weeks.
Yeah, I think it was ultimately, in the end, a good day for the manager, wasn't it, in that sense? Because I think you're right. Like, the first half was really poor, I thought. And it was only actually when I watched the highlights back from Match of the Day that I got in and remembered like how many opportunities they had. Like, at half time, it felt like they were the better side, but they weren't dominant. But if you actually go and look, and obviously they score the goal, then they score a goal exactly like the goal just after. Nketiah has that one headed off the line from Tarkowski, but it's on its way in, isn't it? He gets in the way of it. Wharton has a shot. Tarkowski has that tackle on Mateta on the edge of the box, which I think was forceful but fair. Personally, we won't dive into that too much, but it was a heavy challenge, and they were coming through. And yet, I think the fact that it was Lindstrom being so poor in a way, I think kind of helped Dyche, because I think if it was someone like McNeil, or even if Harrison had started and then put in a performance like that, you might have been a bit more wary about taking them off. But because it was Lindstrom, probably a bit easier to make that substitution, given he's new and he's still lacking in Premier League experience. But I think that the key differences were the early sub, which rectified one issue clearly, and with Harrison coming on, gave us a bit more there. And the other one, it's so obvious, but I just thought that Branthwaite in those last 20 minutes were just everything that we were lacking against Bournemouth, against Villa, and against Leicester in those situations. And there were just little moments in the game, and I don't know if this would have come across people watching on the TV, but him and Tarkowski, you can just see how that relationship works really well, where, Palace were trying to play out, or they'd knock it long, and Mateta would go for the header with Tarkowski, and Branthwaite would just instantly drop back into that position behind to cover and sweep up. And that's kind of the role they each take up, isn't it, in that partnership? Tarkowski is the get out and win headers, get out and tackle, get out and try and stop. And Branthwaite's the one who will drop a little bit deeper, survey the situation, and then use his recovery pace ultimately if the ball gets knocked in behind. And we just saw that chemistry back again. Tarkowski, I don't think, had a great start to the season at all. But I think it was no coincidence to him being back in the team. Sorry, Jared Branthwaite being back in the team on Saturday coincided with his best game of the season as well. And I just think in an alternative universe, say, where Palace come into the game in those last 20 minutes and we've got Keane on or someone like O'Brien, I think in that situation, Everton might buckle and break again and ultimately end up conceding a lead. But I think with Branthwaite being there, it never felt like we were in real danger, because you know how good he is, and you get into situations where you think there's a pass player running forward into space here, but because he's there, it's sound, and you can relax because he's got all the attributes to sort of deal with that. So it's very obvious. But I sort of put on Twitter after the game, we talk so much about football and analyze it in so much depth, and we in so many layers to all this, and we go into what the manager said in press conferences and the way in which he said it, but sometimes just having your best player back helps out a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that composure transmits to teammates as well. So if you're Vitaly Mykolenko, as we said last week, being able to go further up the pitch, knowing that Branthwaite's going to sweep behind you is a big thing. Ditto, I think, James Tarkowski. Your point about Tarkowski is entirely right. I think it was his best performance because he was allowed to focus on the things that make James Tarkowski good normally, without having to worry about what's next to him and behind him and everything else. Branthwaite got better as the game wore on. I think that a few shaky moments early on nearly gave the ball to Mateta and gave Mateta a run on goal. But certainly second half really started to come into his own against, I would say, a difficult and awkward opponent's probably the best word for Mateta. Big. Said on Twitter, watching him in the flesh, it's like, where bowling pins just go scattering everywhere when you get a strike in bowling. It's just defenders kind of flying off him at various angles because how big and powerful
the share tucked in look is an interesting one for him. Like share tucked in, shorts pulled up really high. It's like looks like a rugby player more than a footballer.
I mean, you wouldn't want to get a knock off him, would you? Just sends people flying. But I thought Branthwaite and Tarkowski dealt with him in the main very well. And I also thought there were a few performances that probably will go under the radar, but deserve a mention. Like Ashley Young, and obviously anybody that's watched this program or has seen other things will know that at times he's come in for a bit of criticism for his performances. I thought he was really decisive in his actions for the first goal, in stepping into midfield to win the ball and play the pass into Dwight McNeil. And I think he had another good afternoon at the office after the Leicester game at left back. So he's definitely improved in recent weeks. And maybe that's something to do with the opposition not targeting him quite as much one-on-one. I would guess that a combination of Harvey Barnes and Anthony Gordon this coming weekend against Newcastle from the left probably will do that more. But Ashley Young, yeah, kudos, thought he was good. And I also think in a really kind of quite calm and understated way, Oral Mangala as well. Nothing flashy, nothing really. If you were doing a highlights package or you were watching on Match of the Day, nothing that you could really pinpoint with Mangala. We've spoken already about the first half performance in the midfield getting a bit swamped, but I think that was more of a tactical thing. And when some alterations were made in the second half, I think he just did the really simple things like tracking runners, intercepting the ball in good positions, retaining possession in important areas as well. I thought he was the better of the midfield too again, and has probably started to steady the side a little bit since he came in that role. I mean, Timo Rabunen's gone out, and obviously he'd shown some good things at the start of the season, but just the difference having two experienced I sound like Sean Dyche here, don't I? Two experienced Premier League midfielders there in the centre of the park in a really key part of the pitch. The difference that makes, I think, is quite significant. So loads of good under the radar performances here as well as the big ones with Jared Branthwaite, where kind of getting huge roar from the crowd before kick-off and screaming. Did you see that in the second half where he shepherded the ball out to play? Yeah. And shepherded the ball out to play with Sarr at the park, and he's just screaming at the park end, like properly pumped up for it. All of them seemed really pumped up during and after the game, and
in the eyes as well, wasn't he? At the end, like he was going crazy in front of the Gladys Street and like
and die massively.
Yeah,
and die massively was another one. We're interviewing Dwight McNeil after the game, and in the mix zone, couple of kind of local reporters. Seamus Coleman comes over as soon as it finishes. Dwight's just been speaking about Seamus and his influence on the team and influence on him. Kind of a huge hug. And it just felt like everybody had tried to galvanise after a difficult start to the season. Everybody was pumped up for the win. And I guess they won't get too carried away, but it probably felt important to them to get over the line in one of these. I mean, it was the first time Everton won a league game this season. It was the first time Everton have won a league game after falling behind under Sean Dyche, which is remarkable, really. And perhaps the most curious stat of all, it's the first time Everton have won a game at Goodison under Dyche in which the opposition have scored a goal. So all the kind of these omens, negative omens at half-time, for all of those, Everton turned it around and managed to get what I think could be a really important 3 points, just to kind of calm things down and pick things up. You sense that from the reactions of the players as well.
Definitely. Like, and you said about an interesting moment there in the mix zone. Just one of the moments. I've sort of mentioned it, which I thought was really funny on the pitch was the Tarkowski tackle on Mateta. I don't know if people again watching this on the telly would have gone to this, but Mateta sort of caught him, didn't he, with a flailing arm before that, and Tarkowski was not happy at all. And then obviously unfolded the sequence where Tarkowski goes through him, doesn't he? He wins the ball as well on the edge of the box, but he definitely leaves one on him. And then straight to that, after that, Eze tries to fly in, doesn't he, to just get one back on Tarkowski. But he just sort of goes into the tackle, bounces off Tarkowski and ends up in a lump on the floor himself. Yeah. And then when it's all calmed down and Mateta's actually on the ground, Tarkowski goes up to him while he's on the floor. I don't know what he says to him, but it's reminiscent of, when Roy Keane went over to Alfie Inga Haaland when he's down on the floor and he sort of points a finger and says something like, I imagine it was like, that's what you get sort of thing. It was not, I hope you're all right, mate, I'm going to try and help you up. It was, no, I'll show you sort of thing. So definitely felt like there's no love lost between them two. And it also goes back to what you were saying. That was a point in the game where we were obviously a goal down, but they were all massively pumped up for it. And I think little moments like that undoubtedly show for it. But in addition to those moments and that attitude, you've got to have the bit of quality as well, haven't you? And obviously that came from Dwight McNeil, Paddy on Saturday, and that brings us on to our second point. I think Les Roberts was the first one to say it on the Blue Room at the end of last season that he'd like to see McNeil playing as the number 10. And Les obviously being the visionary that he is, previously suggesting Tom Davis at right back. But this one might be a better shout by the looks of it. I'll be honest, it was something that, as talk throughout the summer, sort of built up on this. I was never really for it. And I still feel at times now, and I'm going to read some stats out in a minute, they're going to make me sound daft here. I still feel at times now it looks awkward and not quite right. But the change in position has really worked for him, hasn't it? Obviously the 2 goals at the weekend, assists coming all the time, and obviously miraculous finish at the weekend. But who scored for the Premier League this season have said that Dwight McNeil's completed the most key passes in the league, the most accurate through balls, the most accurate crosses, third most in terms of big chances created. He's obviously got 3 goals, 2 assists, and on their database, he's the 8th highest rated player in the entire league. He's always been good and all right and functional as he playing off the left wing, but this has just seemed to have unlocked something, certainly from a productivity point of view, in him that was lacking a lot when he was out wide.
Yeah, I think he's probably half a yard of pace away on the wing from being a really, really effective Premier League winger. Just doesn't seem to be able to enough get away from the opposition man. I'm probably a bit predictable going back to previous podcasts, that thing of when he's playing on the left, he's so heavily left-footed that what he wants to do was to get the ball out of his feet and whip in an early cross. So, I mean, Dyche was asked about this after the game and spoke about the positional change and said it basically came around as they were looking at what McNeil had done in previous seasons and worked out that his output was dropping off. And it wasn't anything to do with work rate, because Dwight had been in over at Finch Farmers, as some people will know, with his dad, Matty, a former professional player in his own right, and had been working really hard on his game. So, really good trainer, works hard.
Was it like during the summer, Paddy, or just like in general?
Yeah, during the summer, a couple of weeks before the players were officially back. And a targeted, I believe, as he said to us in the mix zone afterwards, targeted improving his numbers, but came about in a conversation. And I know he's always wanted to play in that role, because when I was over in Evian for Everton's pre-season tour of France and Switzerland a few years ago, he said to me in an interview that he likes playing inside. He likes being more involved in the game, and that's where he feels more confident sometimes when he's got more touches of the ball and he's able to show his ability. Now, I don't think it's perfect yet, and this probably comes across as a little bit unfair, given the stats you've read out and the impact he's made so far. I think since he moved into the centre, he's had 4 goals and 2 assists in those 6 games. So he's performing in terms of output and attacking output. He's performing at a really high level. I think because of how one-footed he is, sometimes that's a weakness in central areas, because you need to be able to take the ball on both sides and go on both sides, and it kind of shuts down certain avenues in attack. But when he's got a bit more time and when he can basically see the pitch in front of him. His left foot's basically as good as anyone's, isn't it? And I don't think that's hyperbole. He's just got a really good left foot. When he joined, there was this sense from Everton's recruitment that he could play on the left, but actually long term. And I think I wrote this at the time. He could play at the left, but actually on the long term in a more progressive side. The idea was they wanted him to come inside from the right and kind of knit play with his left foot and be able to pretty much score the goal he did on Saturday. Now, he is in the number 10 position, and he probably still has to do a bit more on the defensive side in terms of knowing where to be and how to disrupt the opposition's number 6. But he was basically given a bit of a free rein in attack. I was looking at his touches throughout the game, and they're basically scattered all over the final third. He pops up on the left with a great cross that Calvert-Lewin nearly gets to in the first half. There's a great cross to Calvert-Lewin at the end of the first half from the right, where he cuts inside. And there's also bits in the space in between the lines and in the centre of the pitch. So he's allowed to kind of dovetail with Iliman and Dye. He's allowed to dovetail with Jack Harrison and almost go searching for the ball. And clearly, if you give him a shooting opportunity or an opportunity to thread a through ball in space, 25, 30 yards out, he's good. So he likes it. The coaching staff, I think, are happy with him, even though there's an acknowledgement that there's a way to go here. I think my only concern really is that you probably are sacrificing quite a lot of Iliman and Dyche's explosive quality in the final third. Like there was a time in that second half where I commented on Twitter and just said he's just tracked a runner all the way into the left back channel in Dye, with Palace winning a corner. You always think to yourself, he's putting such a shift in here. I just love him to be able to pick up the ball 40 yards from goal and then really put on the afterburners. So it kind of feels like Everton are more varied in attack. I think they're more dangerous in attack. They're looking better than they were last season. They've definitely come on. And I think if they started the season defensively as they had done the year before, then they'd be in a lot better position right now. And still, if they sort out the defensive side with Branthwaite back in, then I think there's enough sign of promise further forward that you kind of look at it and you think Everton should be okay here. McNeil's playing well. I think Calvert-Lewin was quiet actually, and Palace marshalled him pretty well. But he's definitely improved in recent weeks. And then you've got Ndai and Jack Harrison and players like that. I don't know. Looks more promising to me. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, do you know what? I'd be really interested to know if like this McNeil at number 10 was something that they genuinely planned and worked on throughout the summer, or whether it was just something that it was the first time it happened against Bournemouth, wasn't it? I think like there was a few games where Ndiaye came on and McNeil went centrally, but the first time they started like that was against Bournemouth. Like I would love to know if it was like a long-term plan that they'd worked on throughout the summer, or whether it was a case of the season had started so badly, Decore was playing shockingly, they needed someone to fill in as the 10, and he wanted Ndiaye wide to get more on the ball. But I also remember towards the end of last season that there were times where McNeil was coming so far in off that left side, wasn't it? That like he was playing effectively as like he was playing as a left winger on the team sheet, but he was coming off the wing so much to get the ball in narrow positions. And I don't know if that was a tactic that they looked at then and thought, well, maybe we get him in there a bit more, then it could work. But I think
he's always wanted to do it, Matt. He's always, ever since his Burnley days, he's spoken about potentially playing as a number 8 or a number 10. He's always liked the idea of being a central player and believed he's had the technique to do it. But the curious thing is that Everton started with Decore as a number 10. Then they went to Iliman and Dye. And I think actually Ndai was meant to be the succession plan for Decore. But they've looked at both of those options and gone, well, Decore is not giving us enough in certain aspects of the game going forward. And he was clearly off it, even by his own admission when he spoke to us the other week. He said he'd had a really difficult few weeks, Decore. Deservedly dropped from that more advanced role. Ndai plays it, I think, in some of the Carabao Cup games. and they don't ever really get him in the game. And that might be a tactical thing. That might just be him getting used to his teammates and Everton not playing the way that brings Ndiaye out of his shell. But there were discussions then about how do we knit this all together in the final third. And I know as well, it's not just about McNeil. There was a feeling that if they got Ndiaye onto a position where he could come in off the left, he was in a less saturated part of the pitch and he could receive the ball in more space. And he was more likely then to be able to carry it forward and get Everton on the attack. I mean, he's just brought a new dimension to Everton's game in that carrying ability, which they didn't have and haven't had for a while. But also, like, right at the end of that game, winning free kicks. I mean, that's the first time he's basically gone 90 minutes since joining. He looked the fittest he's been, which is no surprise. But he's winning free kicks in really important areas at the end of the game, making sure they can alleviate pressure. And I think when he's gone off before, that's when you've noticed what Everton are like when he's not there, when he's not able to do that for them. So it feels like they've stumbled across something here. Maybe we're not giving them enough credit, but they've stumbled across something here. And so far, I would say, even though it's a work in progress, I'd say the positives probably outweigh the negatives.
Yeah,
as it stands.
Definitely. Like, I think of all the numbers I read out there, I think the one which like surprised me the most is the most accurate through balls in the league. Like for McNeil, like playing 5 accurate through passes, like that. Like, I've never thought of Everton as a team that do that. Like play passes through beyond the lines into a striker that's run onto it. I think a few of them were against Villa, weren't they?
Well, they haven't been, have they? If we're being honest, they were pretty one-dimensional in how they attacked last season. A lot of it, there was such an emphasis on set pieces, and yes, there is still an emphasis on set pieces now. But overall, going back to the point about Everton being more varied in attack, those through balls were not there last season. I think McNeil did one. Did he come off the line to create a goal against Sheffield United?
Chelsea. There's one against Chelsea, wasn't it, earlier in the season, where he played the pass. He came off the line and played the pass through to Calvert-Lewin, and Calvert-Lewin and the keeper sort of converge on it together.
Oh, yeah.
And then Decore picks up the pieces and fires it in. Yeah,
I think there's another one against Sheffield United towards the end of the season where he threads Calvert-Lewin in down the kind of the left side of the box. Calvert-Lewin rounds the keeper and crosses for Decore to head in. And that's probably where you're going to get the most out of McNeil, in fairness. It's probably why people like Les have made comments along those lines before, because there's obviously promise. I think Everton are attacking in a different way this season. Notable to me, by the way, that hardly crossed in the first half, really, against Palace. And it was only when Jack Harrison came on that they actually started to get the ball to the back post and cause problems. What a brilliant piece of skill by Harrison!
Yeah,
for that goal. I mean, the cross is great on his right foot, and it's probably the first example of one Everton winger crossing it to the other one, and for the opposite winger to be at the back post ready to score the goal. I've not seen that in ages for Everton. But the touch to bring it down out of the sky,
he's really good at that.
His first touch is brilliant. His first touch is as good as anyone. And I know from speaking to Sean Dyche and Ian Wone in pre-season that they believe that the technique is there. They believe with Jack Harrison, and Harrison believes it's there. When I interviewed him in the summer, but it's this idea that they've just not been able to unlock it enough yet. And clearly he didn't start the season particularly well. I think he was dropped for Jesper Lindstrom, and Lindstrom deserved to keep his place. Didn't help that Lindstrom, right in front of Dyche, gave the ball away and then didn't track back. And then Dyche took him off at half time and referenced it to us in the press conference after the game. And pretty easy to understand why he'd been subbed at half time. But Harrison always gives you that kind of 10 out of 10 effort. It hasn't clicked so far this season enough, but everybody thinks it could. Coaching staff, player, even his teammates, everyone knows he's got good technique. He can cross the ball off both feet. He probably should be doing more with his skill sets, but he hasn't. So that's going to be the aim for him now. I mean, you would imagine, given the reaction to Lindstrom, from Dyche at half time. Given what Harrison did in the second half, he is now the favourite to come back into the team against Newcastle, particularly because Newcastle are a more dangerous team and may well have more of the ball. But that technique was great, not just to kill the ball, but to fashion the space for the cross and then the wonderful whipped ball with his weaker foot. He made a big difference. Just the intensity, just the ability to keep hold of the ball, force mistakes from the opposition, really hassle the opposition into mistakes, I thought, and force errors. He made a big difference. So they seem to be closer to the formula than they were even a week ago, and I guess that's a huge positive for Dyche.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And just finally on this point, McNeil's goal, it's so weird, like just watching it still, because he doesn't like welly it, does he? He doesn't really curl it. There's not really whip on it, but like I sit behind there, and as soon as he hit it, like I just knew it was in. But at the time on the ground, it felt like it went like a lot higher than it did as well. Like I don't know if it dips right towards the end, but it felt really high. And then when you watch the goal back, it sort of goes in like just above the keeper's height in the corner. So it was such it was a great technique, obviously the way in which he hits it, but sort of an unusual way of striking it, because it's not the laces at all. It's not a curved shot at all. It just sort of just flies in a very strange way. But
have you seen Have you seen the picture that I think is taken almost from corner flag kind of angle, Gladys Street, behind the goal?
Yeah.
So you can see the goal in front of you, the top corner where the ball goes in. And you can also see the Bullens. And there's somebody stood at the top, even before the ball has gone in. I kid you not. Yeah. Somebody is stood there with their arms aloft as the ball sails past the goalkeeper. It must have been from their vantage point, a little bit like you're saying there. Yeah. From their vantage point, they must have just been thinking, that's in. That's already in. And as soon as he hit it, to be fair, it did look like it was in. So
it was one of those where it takes long enough to go in that I've noticed in the ground, like obviously there's the noise before he hit it, and then like everyone's saying shoot, and then when it's on its way, you get that like intake of breath where like the whole ground's quiet and holding the breath, and then obviously the release when it goes in. But yeah, wonderful moment. And he's playing out of his skin twice at the moment, and yeah, enjoyed his or deserved his roast dinner with Still Ryan, as we saw on social media yesterday. So keep it up, mate. But yeah, we're going to finish, Paddy, just as we usually do with a news line. Obviously, last week when we recorded this, it was a bit of a blur, wasn't it? A crazy situation with the takeover agreements being confirmed, and we kind of tried to wrap that up as best we could. We've had some time to breathe on that now. It's a week on. There were no reps from the freaking group there. I don't think, as far as we know, on Saturday. They weren't in Josh Wander's seat in the director's box, were they? But just probably to take the temperature on it, really, a week on from it happening. And obviously we've had some comments from Rights Media Funding, haven't we? We've had some developments in regards to 777 as well. I think one of the UK subsidiary has gone bust or been liquidated effectively. So we've had a few little developments. But how do you feel about what unfolded a week on from it happening?
Yeah, I mean, still positive thoughts, still a feeling that it's the best outcome out of those on the table for Everton, out of John Textor, obviously the previous 777 agreement, and just about everything else. I think it was the most viable option and the one that made most sense, particularly given the £200 million loan to the club, which is, as we mentioned last week, has already been extended, both in terms of the term length of the deal, but also the amount of money they've put in to help the club. I believe the extra sums of money, which are in the tens of millions but remain undisclosed in terms of the actual number, will effectively go towards mostly ensuring the internal fit out is completed in Bramley Moor. The construction of the stadium's more or less there, but it needs to be fitted out internally to get it to a point where it can host events and games and everything else. Any remaining money will help with kind of existing cash flow concerns. So that's obviously overwhelmingly positive news. I'm not too surprised by the lack of updates over the last week, because I think this is going to take a period of time now for them to get regulatory approval. It's never going to take a week or 2 weeks. It's always going to be into the months, I would suggest, in terms of how long it takes the Premier League, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the FA to sign off on this. We wouldn't expect any problems, but they still have to go through the formalities. You also have to, as we were mentioning last week, you also have to make a formal submission to the court in New York with the Leadenhall case, ACAP and 777, and get the court to agree to the accommodation that's been found. But clearly there is confidence from everybody, even to the point where, as you mentioned, somebody representing Rights and Media Funding, one of Everton's creditors, put out, what do you want to call it, a social media statement, if you will, talking about how they'd represented Rights and Media Funding in a successful negotiations around their interests and around the takeover of Everton, pending approval. So we're a week on. You wouldn't expect dramatic developments at this point in proceedings. I also think, for everything we know about the Friedkins, it's that, yes, there's kind of a bit of a showy image. And Dan Friedkin landed a plane on the beach in Dunkirk, as everyone's heard by now. And they spent a lot of money at Roma. Friedkin ferried Lukaku from Brussels to Rome after signing him on loan last year from Chelsea. But there's also another side to them where they actually don't say an awful lot that much. They can be quite private. You don't hear lots and lots about their inner sanctum and how they work. And I don't think they were ever going to turn up. I mean, I wrote last week that the expectation was that, of course, they will be in talks now with the club. They will scrutinise the books in terms of what's needed next. They will look at the executive and leadership structures of the club and think about how the interim board can be strengthened and improved, because it obviously was just a transitional board. All these kind of things are really important, but they weren't ever likely to turn up at games until this was done and dusted. So no shock to me whatsoever that they weren't at Goodison on Saturday. Frankly, they don't need to be. That's kind of I always think of that as a bit more of like a symbolic thing. It's a bit more of a symbolic and emotive thing. But after we've had MSP Sports Capital in there, I think they attended the Southampton 2-1 defeat, didn't they, a few seasons ago? Terrible game for them to go to, by the way. And we've had 777 there so much. I think most people connected with the club just go, yep, that's fine. Let's have minimal fuss here. Let's get it over the line. And then they can step in as new owners, and then they can properly announce what's going to happen and when. So all ticking along, I think, as you would expect at this point.
Yeah, and I think this is obvious again, but it'd be really helpful for them, I think, wouldn't it, if things just settled down a bit on the pitch and they picked up a few wins and pulled clear of that relegation zone in the next few weeks. Because even around me at the game on Saturday, and when things were going badly and at half time, just going down, the conversations you hear are, could they interfere and sack the manager now? Who would they potentially appoint? Have they got the authority to do any of that? Yeah. How long is this all going to take? I think the last thing they will have their own ideas for the long term and what they want to do with Everton in regards to the leadership structure at the top all the way down to what's going on the pitch, I'm sure. But the last thing I think they will want is to get this deal done and they're confronted with a situation where the managers only won 1 or 2 games all season and they've got to try and make a decision on that very quickly. And, Dyche's contract's up in the summer. Kevin Farwell's contract's up in the summer. I think in an ideal world, they'll probably want to come in and see the season out and wait until the end of the season and then make a decision. If they've got to come in immediately and make a big decision like that, goes without saying, but it's really not ideal for them, is it? They'll want things to just calm down a lot on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think that's the priority. If you asked anybody at the club right now, they'd tell you that, yes, the takeover is ongoing and it's important that gets over the line. Work will continue to get that over the line and to get the club and the Freakins in a position where they're ready to tackle this head on whenever approval comes. But the most important thing on Saturday and heading into the next few weeks is that Everton start to stabilise in the league. They get to a position where they actually don't have to panic in January and spend loads of money. Because I know people like the idea of Everton spending money. I know people like the idea of strengthening this squad. But for argument's sake, if Everton did have to go out and spend 50, 60 million in January, there would still be a PSR issue to resolve, probably before June the 30th, at the end of the season. So what you don't want to have to do is you don't have to come in and just immediately make these really quick, almost knee-jerk decisions. I think the best thing, as you say, would be to sit back and assess now. They've got a couple of months to look at what Everton's leadership structures and executive structures need, do due diligence on people who are already at the club and who maybe aren't at the club that they might want to bring in. They can have discussions around what, let's say, for example, with recruitment, what recruitment's going to look like, who's going to be involved, how the, for example, the decision-making process goes. But also, do they need to do anything in January, for example? No, it'd be better if they don't have to. But we might end up in a position, I think the most likely scenario, should this be approved, is that it happens sometime November into December. I think the Right to Media funding lawyer said around the end of 2024, didn't he? Andy Knight. Sometime towards the end of this year. And then there might be a small window after that where you look at the January market. So I like you, I think that the best case scenario for everyone is that this settles down quickly on the pitch. Everton win a few more games in what is a winnable run, as we said. This is a better run of games for Everton. You've got Newcastle at home, tough, Ipswich away, Fulham at home. I think the Southampton and West Ham away in there. Lots of teams that are struggling. In theory, some winnable home games as well. So I think the aim has to be for Everton to consolidate, and then you can kind of look at it with clear eyes and not have to panic, go into panic mode. No good decisions are made in panic mode, really, or they very, very rarely are.
Yeah, mate, 100%. We will wrap it up there anyway this week. It's absolutely battering down there here in Liverpool at the moment. So fingers crossed the weather improves for us. I've got to ask you, actually, Paddy, have you seen the video of the Bramley Moor water feature?
I don't think I have,
the rain has been so heavy today that water has seemingly come down off the roof and is flowing down the stairs in one of the stands. But somebody who knows a lot more about this sort of thing than me on Twitter said that it's something to do with the drainage and it's not been fitted properly yet. So that's understandable.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I suppose there's an excuse at this moment in time, isn't there, for that reason?
Yeah. It is literally not finished yet. Yeah.
Unlike at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff tends to happen pretty regularly. I mean, they've got no excuses whatsoever there, have they? So
no, absolutely not.
I've not seen that. I don't seek it out now, but yeah.
There you go.
It's still a while off. It's still a while.
It's just I saw it today. I was like, even after we've won and we had a good weekend, there's still something that people are unhappy about. But listen, I'm sure all is fine. The stadium seems to be going along nicely. But yeah, we will wrap it up there. Cheers to Paddy as ever. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe. And like I said, if you're listening to us on audio, leave us a rate, leave us a review. And if you're interested in working with us, let's get your brand or business or anything else in front of or in the ears of thousands of Evertonians and some Reds as well who I know listen around the world. Do give us a shout. It'd be great to hear from you. But we'll be back again next week for episode 10 of the Everton Byline to reflect on the game against Newcastle and Anthony Gordon's return to Goodison Park, and hopefully on another 3 points for the Blues. Cheers for listening.